this is our first session, and in this session we have two speakers and two discussants. Although in the book we are told that the first session will start in 13:30, you can see that we are starting with a delay of 10 minutes. So we'll either deduct it from our the time allocated to us, or we will take it from the following session. We will decide according to the conditions, but I'll distribute the time like this. The speakers will speak for 20 minutes, and the discussants will discuss for 10 minutes. I think then we have another 20 minutes which we can be utilized for question and answer session. So the first speaker, according to this book, is Osamah Hussain al-Rawashdeh from Qassim University, Saudi Arabia. And the title of the paper is Market, Social Justice, Market, Society and Government, an Islamic Perspective. You have 10 minutes. I have already mentioned. 20, of course.
والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق محمد بن عبد الله عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. على بوابة جامعة اسطنبول it's written إنا فتحنا لك فتحا مبينا. So today we are first of all I'm glad to be here. We are about to talk the social justice market, society, and government, and Islamic perspective. I am a co-author with a doctor for Prof. Toseef, but due to his full engagement, he could not come. So I will present instead of him. We'll start with the question, thoughts and questions. Is market capable to distribute the resource in justified way? And the second, why are there some negative opinion towards functions of market? Next, a balanced view of Islam towards social justice and its impact. What are also the ethics principles for social justice and the role of institutions? More questions. How is our moral obligations related to our duties and how an imbalance can be addressed? What is the Islamic response towards social justice? How can we have sharing and cooperate among ourselves, and how can we look together ahead in the same directions? These are the questions which we'll answer in the following slides. So invitations to add your comments, objections, and correction to these presentations are welcome. little bit small. An appeal from the current society. Social protections. Why you no exit anymore? We can see nowadays in all over the world, it's appealed somewhere, these social responsibilities, even from the private or from the government sector. It is no exit anymore. The theories, social justice, conventions view, Hayek, according to Hayek, say there can be no distributed justice where no one distributed. Novak said social justice is a virtue and attribute of individuals, or it is a fraud. Also, Brock says the role of individuals, group of people, and customs are very much important in maintaining the justice. We have two theories here. Procedural theories of justice, distributive economics theories of justice. We are all just going to allocate of goods and service among the members of the societies, establishing a more administrative, political, and social institutions. Third one is leads to a strong role of political institutions, emphasize more on regulations for the market as well as economy, and consequently able to maintain the social justice. Answer also that regarding the theory, there are different theories emerge in the literature related to above mentioned discussions. Among them, Rawls' theory of justice as a fairness and the difference people, Dawkins' resource-based approach to the social justice. Also, the last sentence, capability approach to social justice got the more attentions among the scholars. Once again here, benefits and burdens are equally distributed among the participants. Also, a state is responsible for providing the resource and individuals are responsible for their own well-being. The last sense, the role of society in terms of redistributions of the needs, resource, and opportunities. Here we find social justice is an abstract term which is different and under different systems such as socialism, communism, and welfare states, and also mixtures of idea and the political project. Also, once again, Hayek says is an opinion that social justice is a meaningless concept. It's the joint responsibility of the society and the individuals to maintain the social justice and should maintain the optimal balance in between the two ends. Here we can find how we can share the fairness. Is invisible hands of market sufficient? These the ones to get a job somewhere. For a fair selections, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. I think only one, he can climb this tree, and the others, they will not climb that tree. Also, in our market, we find byproducts of market are undesirable, inequality, unequal distributions of income, exploitations of the poor, value of free functioning, jobless, stock, storm fear. This is what is dealt in our market. Here, the private sector. Can private sector able to produce social justice? We can imagine from this slides, see the owner of the company, how he is delicate or he's dealt with the wages or the laborers. See the employee. Income and how he can get the employee, how he can some social justice or some one of his rights. Another things, current states of the global without moral values. You just repeat with me. No, there is no income inequality. There is no income inequality. And even also, on the other side, there is, please, may I have some more? This is the private sector, how we deal with the employees. Who suffers and who enjoys? All of us cries. I cries, you cries, he or she cries also. We cries, you cries, and the other side, they laugh. Combination of markets, governments, and society without morals, there is a social justice. The government lies, the banks steal, the rich laughs. A great moral society and economy, the only solutions which gives by Islam. We found here the Islams can find the solutions or already found the solutions for us, make a difference. Islam doesn't lie. Islam's regarding the distributions, truth. Islam guides us the right way. Fairness, justice, inclusions, we find opportunity, diversity. Equity, not equality, guided by the Quran and Sunnah. Every agent of economy and society are complements to each other also. And every sectors and institutions go together, comprehensive approach. How we can see from the slides, all hands together, and even the imbalance the same. Foundations of social justice in Islamic framework, caught up in 1980, absolute freedoms of conscience, the complete equality of all men, the permanent mutual responsibility of society. One more message of Islam and social service with justice also shows the most noble of you, and the sight of Allah is the most right of you. Here we find the imposes of Islam and responsibilities. However, Islam also put the social and mutual responsibilities on the member of the society or in the communities as the whole. That is responsibility between man and its soul. Between a man and his family, between the individuals and society, between one community to other and one nation to another. Also, embodies Islam defines the morals of the society and identifies the limits of the individual and community. It is not possible for individual and society to cross the limits which are imposed by the Sharia. The messengers of Allah said, no one faith among you is reliable until he likes for his brother in Islam what he likes for himself. Bukhari. لا يؤمن أحدكم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه كما يحب لنفسه. Here we find the definitions of justice, conventions and Islamic framework. Definition: justice, the conventional to give what is owed in Islam frame, no harm to anyone and follow the rules of Sharia. Communicative justice, what is owed between two persons in exchange, morally and economically, no subversions among the members of the societies. Obligations between the community and its member, divided into general and particular justice. Distributed the economic, social, psychological, religious, and human capital on merit basis that's in the Islamic frame. Community owed to that community in Islamic frame, dependency, and the moral environment with its basic traits. Last one is, what's community owed to its member? Market, government, and society are complements in Islamic work, are complement to each other and fill that gap which is not filled by the others. Islam does not like it. Its system of charity improves the states. Firms are main source of social justice. No one can find justice here. Thank you.
I thank our first speaker. I was preparing a paper to remind him that 5 minutes are left. So he finished before the time allocated to him. So he really deserves a thank. This is not to encourage you to finish earlier, but just to appreciate his performance. Thank you very much. And it's, of course, now our second speaker is Valentino Catalan from University of Florence, Italy. And his paper is Human Freedom, Market Economy, and Social Justice in Islam.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the introduction. I do not know if I will follow your suggestion to keep it brief, but I will try to keep it in the 20 minutes as agreed. Thank you very much also to the organizers. I have already participated in this workshop 2 years ago, and I must say that I have noticed many improvements, so you are progressing very well, and I want to congratulate on you for this. Thank you also to combine my presentation with the one just given by Dr. Osamah, because in a certain sense they match, they complement each other very well. As Dr. Osamah, I am looking into market economy and social justice in Islam, but as if he has focused mainly on a systematic perspective, so according to an approach top-down, I am looking on the other side from the bottom, looking at the role of the individual in a Muslim society and an Islamic economy, focusing on the concept of human freedom. So during these 20 minutes, I will give you an interpretation of what is human freedom in an Islamic economy and how it is different from a conventional perspective. Just to give you some information, my background is in law, so I am a lawyer, but I've always worked on Islamic economics and finance, so usually I am mistaken for an economist, but I'm not an economist. And also I've usually worked on a comparative perspective, so conventional and Islamic law, conventional and Islamic economics and capitalism, one side and the other side. As I just told you, I will focus on the concept of human freedom, and specifically I will try to reply to 3 questions which are interrelated one another. And namely, which is the role of human freedom in an Islamic conceptualization of the market? To which extent is the free market economy, the conventional market economy, compatible with the notion of social justice in Islam? And the third one, which instruments can enhance wealth redistribution in an Islamic economy? In the light of this, I have organized my presentation in 2 parts. The first part is mainly descriptive. I will try to define the concept of human freedom in a conventional and in an Islamic perspective. The second part, which will try to reply to questions 2 and question 3, will be mainly normative in order to give some policy making instruments in order to promote human freedom according to an Islamic perspective in the market economy. So, moving directly to part 1, again the descriptive section. The role of contractual freedom in a certain sense is, in my perspective, of fundamental importance to understand how market economy works. And it is so important that, in my mind, all the conceptual organization of conventional capitalism can be dated back with the concept of human freedom to the famous metaphor of the invisible hand made by Adam Smith, who is considered the founder of economics as a discipline in the West. As you all know, the idea of Adam Smith is that apart from the natural tendency towards self-interest by each participant of the market, some sort of invisible hand will lead beyond his own personal intention to social prosperity. In this sense, these are 2 fundamental quotations. In his book, Adam Smith remarks how every individual necessarily labors to render the annual revenue of the society as great as he can, but in doing so, he just intends his own gain, and he is in this led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. The most famous quotation is probably the second one, where he referred to the fact that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. Now, this quotation is probably the fundamental representation of what human freedom, of how human freedom is conceived in a conventional perspective. Human freedom, as you can see, is basically self-interest and self-love. And it is the efficiency of the market based on self-interest which leads to the growth of the market. In the light of this, the invisible hand of the market economy has led to an utilitarian conception of the unregulated market. The more a market is unregulated, the more efficient it is. An idea of a social coordination without a coordinator, and a philosophical perspective of the laissez-faire of contractual freedom, which makes, from a legal perspective, a direct link to what I have defined as the autonomous hand of the individual. On the one side, we have the invisible hand of the efficiency of the market. On the other side, the autonomous hand of the individual acting only according to his own self-interest and his own self-regulation, and leading in the end to a conceptualization of the free market in the West according to two fundamental parameters, which is the division of resources and competition among individuals in order to succeed. These are the parameters in order to lead to the efficiency of a market. Now, working on the concept of the invisible hand and linking the idea of human freedom to self-interest, at a certain point I made a move to the idea of interest and to how the self-interest leads to economic interest as a variables of a market economy, and then to debt economy. As you can see, there is a sort of logical progression from the idea of self-interest to interest as a remuneration of a capital and the debt economy. And if you take a recent book by David Graeber on the debt economy and all the deficiencies of the debt economy of Western economic thought, it is quite interesting that in the book by Graeber, we find two fundamental hypotheses. On the one side, there is an attempt of reconceptualizing the invisible hand by Adam Smith in relation to the divine providence, contextualizing the expression at the time of Adam Smith, so 4 centuries ago. But more important for our reasoning is probably that, according to Graeber, Adam Smith, in his theory of the invisible hand, made some hidden references to medieval scholars, especially to Al-Ghazali and Al-Tusi, since there are fundamental similarities among the reasoning of Adam Smith and the one by Al-Ghazali and Tusi. In particular, like Smith and this famous example of the division of labor, in the treatise by Al-Tusi, we find an idea that in order to be efficient, the labor has to be divided in different sections, and this is the turning point of the reasoning, wherefore Smith, the division of labor is the result of a natural propensity towards individual advantage, so the self-interest. For Al-Tusi, the division of labor is an extension of mutual aid. Now, it is this passage from the self-interest to the mutual interest, which belongs to an Islamic economy, which has led my interpretation to find as alternative to the conventional system this criteria of sharing and cooperation as cornerstone of an Islamic economy. As you can see, Western economy, division and competition. When we move to the idea of mutual aid, which is typically Islamic, we find, on the contrary, parameters of sharing and cooperation, which enlighten, in a certain sense, all the conceptualization of contractual freedom. This conceptualization can be defined both in legal and economic terms, in which sense, from a legal perspective, and the reference to Sharia as a source of Islamic law, we find as fundamental starting point the ontology and cosmology of Islam, and so the concept of the unity of a creation, which leads in Islamic social justice to a reconceptualization and a reformulation of all the different elements of justice that have already been mentioned by Osamah, in particular legal justice, commutative justice, and distributive justice. Speaking of legal justice, in an Islamic conceptualization of social justice, it is not only the creation by itself, which is the result of God's decree, but also the right of each individual comes from a Tawhidi framework. If any right comes from the unity of the creation, then, of course, as an immediate result, we can move to the commutative justice of Islam, where we do not find anymore a division and an opposition between right and obligation, as in Western economic thought, but to an idea of justice where right and duty merge into the creation. Again, this fundamental idea of unity changes perspective towards criteria of sharing and cooperation, which become probably much more visible when we move to distributive justice, the third aspect of social justice, and the famous appreciation in Islamic economy for equity instead of debt. Now, if this is the legal interpretation of justice in Islam, an immediate correspondence can be found in the Islamic conceptualization of property right, so looking at Sharia also as source of economic behavior. There is a sort of bilateral connection between legal justice, commutative justice, and distributive justice, and what I am now describing with reference to property rights. Why? Because if you look at the idea of legal justice in terms of the reality of right, of what is created, then of course the understanding moves directly toward the focus on the real economy, which is a fundamental aspect of Islamic economics and finance. The second aspect, the commutative justice, finds in Islamic property rights the fundamental parameter of contractual equilibrium, which is well represented by the prohibition of riba, harar, and maisir. We must maintain an equilibrium which moves us far away from debt economy and the application of interest as self-interest. Last point, equity, the attention to equity, and then profit and risk sharing, where we have a distributive and inclusive approach against the individual perspective of conventional capitalism. Now, if we take the scale as a metaphor of social justice, I find this passage particularly important, a passage by a philosopher of social justice, where it is underlined how much in Western economy the conceptualization is on the two separate pans. So we look at a struggle basically between one side and the other side of the balance, and then we try to correct it as much as possible. If we move in reverse in an Islamic economy, all the attention goes to the central pivot. So we start from the unity of the market system, and it is the unity that we have to maintain. So there is no more division and competition, but the idea of a cooperation among the two sides in order to keep this unity alive as much as possible. In the light of all this, the concept of contractual freedom, which certainly exists also in an Islamic economy, is completely reformulated according to another philosophical, ethical, religious perspective. And we do not find anymore the famous representation of the justice as a blind lady, which is very famous in a Western perspective. Because far away from an abstract and hypothetical description of human freedom where everybody is equal, because we imagine that there is no difference, in an Islamic perspective, on the contrary, we enter into the real dimension of human freedom, where we take into clear consideration that there are differences, that these differences has to be filled, has to be overcome as much as possible, and the idea of human freedom becomes commiserated to the real economic condition of market actors, moving to the market as a place of exchange to the community as a place of social interaction. So the perspective becomes much more inclusive in the light of the definition of mutual aid from which I started my reasoning. Now, if we have to take into consideration this reformulation of the idea of contractual freedom as action of the individual in the market, we can now move into the second part and the normative perspective in order to find some instruments to transform the market into a shared enterprise of mutual cooperation. Now, in this slide, I have tried to summarize as much as possible which is the logic behind this shift, moving from the market to the community development, from the growth as a criteria of efficiency to the development as a criteria for social improvement. As I already said, If in conventional economics, the fundamental criteria behind the invisible hand are the criteria of division and competition, in an Islamic economics, we find the criteria of sharing and cooperation backed by the famous Maqasid al-Sharia, if you work on Islamic economics. And then into a God's reinterpretation of the invisible hand. It is God's guidance which provides a community development. From the abstract notion of contractual freedom as the autonomous hand, which is equally applicable to all, we move towards a human freedom which must be contextualized in real economic conditions, so recognizing as much as possible that social differences exist, and we have to turn the disadvantage of the poor into an advantage in market economy. And then, as a result, from the idea of a market as a place of economic exchange, whose success is measured in terms of efficiency, towards an idea of community as a place of human and social development, where the criterion of efficiency is replaced by a criteria of legitimacy that in Islam is, of course, the guidance given by the revealed word. In the light of this, and looking at the role of the individual as a free actor also in an Islamic economy, in my perspective, the instrument of zakat, which has certainly a fundamental role in an Islamic economy, is not sufficient. Of course, it is part of the framework, but it has been to combine also to other instruments, which cannot be found simply by a reformulation and a readaptation of the capitalistic model, in order to promote a community-based development. At the same time, the second side of the slide, we should not look only to Islamic law and to the application of formal rules taken from the Sharia tradition as it is made today from a strict legal perspective. On the contrary, it is the implementation of different possible strategies of financial inclusion towards which our intention and attention should go. In this slide, I just provide you with a list of this possible strategy, which goes from the improvement of retail banking towards local communities, microfinance, the use of Islamic project finance to promote local development. Also today, Sharia-compliant crowdfunding, which is an instrument which is having growing popularity today. Looking at the global sukuk market as the Islamic capital market, I do think that the improvement of the efficiency of the market is insufficient by itself, because all this capital should be channeled as much as possible into Waqf institution, in order to promote, as in the past, local development. So the rediscovery of the Waqf as an instrument to promote at a local level the new development of the individual, okay, which is something completely different from the global market of sukuk and its efficiency today. Within this framework, of course, we should also rethink the role of Sharia scholars, which are now involved only in the preliminary phase of the structuring of Sharia-compliant products. In which sense? In the sense that certainly Sharia scholars today have a fundamental role in guaranteeing the Sharia compliance, but we should also look at the substantial social impact that this product have in the market. So in this sense, I do suggest that the Sharia scholars should also be involved in the second step in the report of a social impact, so having a monetary function on the substantial result of Sharia products. And in this capability to link financial growth and community development, they should also be considered accountable for their role. So it is not only the certification of Sharia compliance, a role for Sharia scholars, but also the substantial impact in the market of this product. To conclude, which distance today which kind of distance today we can postulate between the market and the community, and the visible hand and the guidance of the revealed word? In order to stress this distance, so from the conventional to an Islamic perspective, I do think that also a reference to Islamic ethic in classical theology should be considered valuable. And in this sense, I reported here a quotation by Stelzer, where it is clearly said that in Islam, a human being does not exist before the law, or better, it can be understood as an ethical being in action only as a particular manifestation of a divine word by way of the word. So the human being is basically the agent of God as witness of the divine word. And in this sense, as a conclusion, we should say that in Islamic economy, we do have human freedom, but this freedom exists only within the unity of the creation, with all the consequences that I have formulated before, where men are constituted by way of the divine word, and participate in the market by sharing resources in a venture of cooperation aimed at community development. This is my attempt to summarize all this idea. As last remark, and maybe we can discuss this question later on, how much does this shift from the visible hand to God's guidance has been realized today? I do think that still today we have fundamentally two issues at stake. The first one is the persistence of a market-oriented approach also in Islamic finance, where everything is concentrated on the efficiency of the products rather than on the legitimacy of the human action, thus maintaining a disconnection between the abstract human freedom and the real distributive justice of community development. Speaking of community development, and this makes an end and makes a link again with the presentation made by Dr. Osamah, we do have in community development also a role for governments. Governments of Muslim countries should be in charge to promote a community development, which of course is linked to issues, to open issues of democracy, of political participation, of civic empowerment, and the need for a stronger governance of financial institutions in Muslim countries, which of course represents probably the frame where an Islamic human freedom can be actively performed. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to receive some comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, another good performance in terms of... now it is time for discussion. I want to reverse the order in this program. So we'll start with the discussion of the second paper, and then we'll continue with the discussion of the first one. So the discussant of the second paper is Mehmet Saraj from Istanbul University. The time allocated to discussant is 10 minutes.
Thank you, President. Assalamu alaikum, bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu rasulillah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Although the conventional teaching or mindset of so-called conventional economics based on the myth of invisible hand still dominates our books and our lives, a serious search for a new paradigm has been more and more visible all over the world. There's an amplified emphasis on more mutual, cooperative, and human-oriented economy and responsible finance. This is, of course, not the first time that the capitalism or free market economy being criticized. However, today's opposition seems much more widespread and free from political fanaticism. It is rather a result of sincere efforts by a diverse population of thinkers and practitioners who have common sense and wisdom. I can use cite some names such as Eisenstein and Schiller, or I listened to the president of Luxembourg Stock Exchange, for instance, 2 years ago. Also, we are hearing the Iceland plan based on the Chicago plan regarding this 100% reserve banking, for instance. Well, it is obvious that the Islamic teaching and experience qualify as the ultimate and most concrete resource to the conceptualization and theory building process towards new paradigm. Dr. Catalan's paper provides a very good contribution in this sense. My involvement to this discussion of this paper is also a nice coincidence, because we have been discussing Professor Cengiz Kallek's book, Social Wealth, the relationship between state and market in Islam, especially with my doctoral students. We all know that the Islamic economy is also a market economy. And the human or contractual freedom is one of the pillars of Islamic teaching. This is where perhaps the most challenging point as to how we construct a distinct framework and theory. Dr. Catalan makes a really good job in this sense, or in this regard. He first explains the Western conception of contractual freedom in the light of Smith's myth, Invisible Hand, and makes a wise comparison with the Islamic understanding of human and contractual freedom, and explain the distinct features of Islamic view. I would like to underline one essential point, that everything starts with the definition of human being as we understand the Allah's Khalifa, Khalifatullah, as opposed to what he described, indistinguishable members of generic species, or basically Homo economicus. Well, I here would like to recommend that the author should cite this original word Khalifa instead of solely using agent. I also find the Catalan's discussion on Graeber's argument very beneficial because you know, his book, new book, The Debt, Graeber's new book, is very popular in Turkey. It was published in Turkish as well. Another distinct feature of Islamic economy is that it substitutes the centrality of economic exchange with the centrality of social person as Allah's Khalifa. This transforms the market into a place of social interactions, not merely of economic exchange. This is, in fact, has an historical background or footing from even the Sahabi period. Remember, Abdullah bin Umar, radiallahu anh, for instance, frequently went to marketplace, not to shop, not shopping for shopping reasons, only to greet people. This brings us the comprehensive development of the community, which is also the key to achieve genuine Islamic financial system. Today, we as academics and professionals discuss in many platforms the absence of genuine Islamic financial institutions. The author here states the key point. Islamic economic thought cannot be fully understood and practiced unless the Islamic idea of contractual freedom is entwined with a market founded on mutual trust and cooperation. Of course, the achievement of genuine Islamic financial system requires all parties to have the same ideal and motivation. That is, the Islamic financial institutions, investors, fund users, and regulatory bodies. Here, I should tell you that there's a sincere and hard effort in some regulatory bodies in Turkey, including Banking Regulation and Supervision Agency. They formed a task forces working on in collaboration with us as academics from Istanbul and Sakarya University on some regulations to transform the Islamic financial sector industry into more mutual, cooperative, and risk-sharing finance platform. To conclude, I repeat that this paper provides a sound building blocks in the conceptual framework of Islamic economy. Now I have some small recommendations. It would be better to develop a proper connections to the divine texts namely Quran and Hadith, when necessary. Second, he should provide proper exemplifications from historical experience from Islamic economy from Prophet's sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time to Ottoman's experience. And finally, I would recommend him to consider or evaluate Professor Esat Zaman's practical solutions, perhaps in the next work. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think it will be better to finish discussion papers and then open the forum for question and answer. So then it's your turn. You have another 10 minutes, and now our in this booklet, the first discussant, but according to the order I am following, the second discussant is Professor Fatih Savaşan from Sakarya University.
Selamun Aleyküm. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The paper I will evaluate is by Toseef Azid and brother Rawashdeh. The title of the paper is Social Justice, Market, Society and Government, an Islamic Perspective. I will make some general comment on the paper, and I will talk about main themes of the paper. I will talk about then main conclusions of paper. I will finish with some suggestions to authors of the paper. First of all, I need to mention that authors present a good reviews of the literature on social justice and the interaction between market, society, and government in the conventional system. We can identify two broad categories of how social justice can be achieved and to what extent government should involve in the process. On one hand, there are those who advise no government intervention and deeming that intervention is unjust and immoral, as in Nozick, as natural right liberal and empirical liberals. And on the other hand, there are those making room for some type of government intervention, Rawls, Sen, and others among those. We all know that there are two main goals of economics. The first one is efficiency, and the other is equity. In the literature, it is discussed that the first goal, which is efficiency, is relatively easily achieved by free markets. But as for equal distribution of income, and literature discusses that market fails more in the second objective. And also we know that there is some trade-off between efficiency and equity. Of course, we can identify some channels through which just distribution of income and wealth would help growth, like social stability and social capital. The paper talks about some literature review. We know that it is evident that free market fails to achieve social justice. It produces inequalities, greediness, and selfishness, and the market doesn't distribute the benefits in a justified way. So there is a solution in the capital system and may be developed for the survival of the capital system, which is welfare state. Welfare state is a social system in which a government is responsible for the economy and for the economic distribution of income, and government has policies to provide free health care, money for the jobless people. So welfare state is a notion developed in and for the survival of capitalist system. I can say that the survival of the capitalism depends on its elasticity to changing conditions in the economy, in the world economy. Welfare state is one solution developed by capitalists. With respect to Islamic economics, paper claims that Islamic system is purely based on the universal set of morals. It draws from Titiana, and the author states that morals of duty and morals of responsibility are what matters in Islamic economics. And they give two illustrations. The first one is the illustration one at macro level, system of zakat, and in micro level, it talks about distributive justice through firm, basically profit and risk sharing products in financing. I will make some suggestions to the authors. It talks about just distribution of income and poverty alleviation, and it talks about zakat and interest-free financing. To me, it seems like stressing or focusing more on zakah in income distribution is somewhat misproduction. I can argue that interest-free economy is the main driving force in equal distribution of income in Islamic perspective. Zakah is an institution that only corrects after the income is distributed among people. So instead of placing on zakah, which is only to me a corrective measure, focusing on interest-free economy would be much better in terms of income distribution. And one more thing I need to suggest to the authors. It talks about morals a lot in the paper. To me, morals are only useful to grease the wheels. We have to have wheels first, which, what I mean with wheels, working mechanisms in the economy. How you are going to generate income and which mechanisms you are going to be utilizing to distribute income. So too much emphasis on the value-driven behavior is problematic, and we can say that Islamic economics is not only for Muslims. You should put some working mechanisms. You should claim that Islamic economics can help solving problems in non-Muslims, for non-Muslims problems as well. So Islamic economics should broaden the perspective. It should move to non-Muslims as well. And when we press on moral a lot, then we put a scenario like we will have angel-like people, angel-like individuals, and then Islamic economics will work. I think this is not the way. So we will have some people who misbehave and some people will behave better. But you have to have working mechanisms. You have to have mechanisms that control everybody, whether they behave Islamically or un-Islamically. Then, on top of that, if people behave Islamically, it will be even better. So you have to put mechanism first, then expecting that people are angel-like people, then the system will work better. Of course, from the paper, I can say that it focuses on zakat, but there are other nations or there are non-Muslims, they give a lot of charity. So we should make some distinctions, and also we should talk about some resemblance between other charitable activities and zakat. The paper can talk about the difference and similarities between other charitable activities and zakat. And one more point maybe, which is important to mention, the paper misses government part. The title suggests that social justice, market, society, and government, an Islamic perspective, but I don't see how government involves in this zakat and other illustrations in Islamic perspective. How far can government go? What size the government should be? And we know that programs aiming poverty alleviation have some setbacks. For example, the rich might substitute leisure for work, and poor might prefer not to work for little income he can earn. So we should take care of these problems. Of course, we know that zakat reduces asymmetric information that government faces in poverty alleviation programs. This is an important feature of zakat, of course. We know that also zakat reduces the transaction cost, but as income and urbanization go up, increase in Islamic societies, there are some institutions established to distribute zakat funds. So we know that government has some asymmetric information problem. Together with those institutions, zakat institutions, we know that zakat system will have some troubles with respect to asymmetric information. So we should talk about these issues as well when we talk about how zakat and interest-free system can distribute income. And also, maybe the paper to connect social justice with government and zakat, the paper should talk about how zakat should be interconnected to the social transfer system and taxation policies of income. So these are suggestions I can make with respect to paper. As I said, paper reviews conventional system very well, but to me it seems like it has some deficiencies with respect to how Islam can solve those problems. Thank you.
Now, I'll give 5 minutes to each speaker to answer what has been expressed by the discussants, but just 5 minutes, not more than that. Okay, thank you.
I'll keep it in 5 minutes, don't worry. Professor Saj, thank you very much for your very careful reading of my paper. And thank you for identifying the most important points, summarizing the contents. I just had two comments on what you said. First of all, thank you for underlining that during the last decade, also in conventional economics, much improvement has been done on the side of social responsibility. So the idea of the invisible hand working solely as the only factor has been dismissed, of course, also in Western economic theory. There is much more attention on social justice, at least on some side of economic theory. Moving to my second remark, of course, my fundamental purpose in the paper was to show which kind of epistemological change we have in Islamic economics, and in this sense, which kind of alternative economic theory can be found as Islamic. And we can use this in order to differentiate Islamic economics from the Western traditional economic thought. In the light of this, of course, my paper is incomplete in many aspects because, as you said, reference to the Prophet, to the tradition, to the role of a Khalifa and the Vice Regency, all these aspects are interconnected when we refer to human freedom, but I had to make, of course, some selection in order to keep a balance in my comparative approach. In this sense, and looking also at the comment of the second speaker, I do think that, yes, just to summarize, the idea that from the self-interest to the idea of interest in economic theory to a model of interest-free economy, in these three logical passages, of course, the literature should be able to underline as much as possible how much economic interest reflects an idea of the market, which still belongs to the famous Homo economicus, while when we move to an interest-free economy, which means cooperation, sharing, then of course there is a paradigmatic change behind. So it is not only the idea of the application of Islamic law or certain correction that can make a difference. It is really, at least in my perspective, this sort of paradigmatic turning point that changes the perspective also of the economic science as a social science. So a more inclusive and more comprehensive theory of economics, yeah. Exactly, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it is your turn.
Thank you, Dr. Fatih, for your valuable comments and suggestions, and sure it will be taken into considerations. So without your comments, there will not be any kind of improvement. The comments should be there. Anyway, lots of comments there, so I'll just brief them. All of us, we are responsible for justice. It started from me, from all of us. So you said we have taken that zakats out. Zakat is one of the Muslims' pillar. Ita is zakah. So nobody's giving the zakat as a zakat or as a pillar. It's one of the Islam pillar, you know. So if we instead giving the zakat, so we will not find any, we will not be here, you know. That will be justice and will be social justice. So nothing for non-Muslims problems. If there will be justice in Islam, that will be obligate for the whole Muslims or non-Muslims. So once again, many thanks for your suggestions and comments, and will be really taken into consideration. Thank you very much. Bye.
as you can see, I am a very lucky session moderator. Everybody is keeping to the time allocated to them very nicely. And although we started a bit late, we'll be able to finish in time. But I just want, normally moderators take some time to give an informal paper. But this moderator will not do that. But I'll just try to make two corrections. I had a talk in the morning session, and I said one thing that may have caused some misunderstanding. I said something about the name of what we call Islamic economics. I have no problem with the English term used for Islamic economics. Islamic economics is okay. But in Turkish, we say İslam İktisadı. If you translate it into English, you will say economics of Islam. So it will not be Islamic economics, but it will be economics of Islam, which is not correct. Here we are not doing economics of Islam, but we are doing Islamic economics. So economics of Islam can be done, can be tried, but it is quite a different thing. So, but everybody who is working in the field of what we call Islamic economics in Turkey are aware of this. They are not doing economics of Islam, but they are doing Islamic economics, but still the name is not correct. This is what I wanted to express in the morning session. I think now the situation should be clear, because miscommunication is always there. But I want to make one recommendation for the reading list of Islamic economists. They normally, all of us are educated in the Western tradition. So we are educated or trained in the liberal tradition with its classical, neoclassical, and Keynesian versions. So we are educated, we are trained, brought up within liberal tradition, one can say. Sometimes we try to balance this or counterbalance this with a reading of Marxian economics, but it is just the opposite side, and it is not quite useful. I would recommend to put another name on the reading list, which is Karl Polanyi. I would recommend everybody who is working in the area of Islamic economics to have a good reading of, or satisfactory reading of, Karl Polanyi. And of course, nothing will make up for a satisfactory reading of Islamic sources. Normally, Islamic economists, those who work in the field of Islamic economics, are not quite aware of classical Islamic sources. They just take one ayah and take some hadith, and this is all the equipment, and they try to do their work with this. This is not enough. This should be there. This is necessary, but is not sufficient, because we have a history of 1400 years. And it hasn't been experienced for nothing. And if we are not able to utilize an experience of 1400 years, this means that we are not doing good things. So satisfactory familiarity with classical Islamic sources is also, must also be there. But of course, this is something that is not easy to achieve. So, but just to remind that what we are doing should be there. but it should be supplemented or complemented with some other things. Now, we have 5 minutes left for questions and answers from the floor. It's okay, it's your turn. You can ask either the speakers, main speakers, or you can ask the discussants. Okay, please.
Thank you. My question is for Valentino. The question is why... Thank you. Thank you. My question is for second presentation. Why do you not emphasize the particularity of private which affects freedom and affect the structure of markets? Because we know that property is limited in time in Islam, and also it is limited by the collective property. Thank you.
Yes, I would reply as I said to Professor Sarach. I had to make a choice. I mean, when I started my paper, and I told you I have a legal background, I started by reviewing the different opinions of the schools of law, looking at the idea of human freedom in the Hanbali, Maliki, Shafi'i. Of course, this could be an approach, but looking at this workshop as an economic workshop, I thought to myself, no, this is not relevant, or this is not what I want to say. So I prefer to focus on the epistemological foundation of the idea of freedom in conventional and Islamic economics. You are totally right. I mean, the concept of mal, the function of mal in the society, so the idea of how property rights are in the market is certainly valuable, and I totally agree with you, but it would be another paper for the next time. Thank you.
So we will expect you next year or the year?
Yes, if it will be in line with the topic of the workshop, I will keep the suggestion for next year.
Okay.
Hocam sorum size olacak affınıza sığınarak.
Bana mı?
Evet, müsaade
ben
buyursanız.
Ben değilim ki.
Peki. Hani İslam Economics'in karşılığının Türkçe'de tam belirttiniz mi, yoksa sadece şu anki İslam İktisadını İngilizce'de Economics of Islam diye çevirdiniz?
Evet.
Türkçe'de
İslami İktisat. Türkçe bana göre doğru isim İslami İktisattır. Zaten Islamic Economics'i çevirin Türkçe'ye, İslami İktisat olur. Eğer İslam İktisadını İngilizce'ye çevirirseniz Economics of Islam demeniz gerekir. Ya da İktisadul İslam demeniz lazım Arapçada. İktisadul İslam demeniz gerekir. Hiçbirisi, şimdi bak, Economics of Islam'da ne yaparsınız biliyor musunuz? Economics of Islam'da İslamiyeti iktisat perspektifine koyarsınız. İslamiyet ekonomik bakımda nasıl bir performans sergileyebiliyor? Bunu görmeye çalışırsınız. Yani çalışmanızın konusu iktisadi açıdan İslamiyet'in incelenmesidir. Halbuki İslami iktisatta durum tam tersinedir. Siz iktisadı İslam perspektifine koyuyorsunuz. Burada tam bir perspektif var, çevrilmesi var. Yani İslami iktisatta perspektifiniz İslam'dır. Siz iktisat alanını İslami perspektife yerleştirmektesiniz. Halbuki İslam iktisadında eğer kelimenin etimolojinin anlamına sadık kalırsanız, sizin iktisadı esas alıp İslamiyet'i o perspektiften incelemeniz gerekir. Ki kimsenin yapmak istediği Türkiye'de bu değil, biliyoruz.
Galiba problem biraz da bizim geçirdiğimiz bu Türkçemizle ilgili badirelerin bir sonucudur maalesef. Bizdeki bu aidiyet uzatmalı ekinin Türkçe ile ilgili, yani bununla ilgili geçirdiğimiz bu safahatın bir menfi sonucu galiba. İşte Türkçe'de bu ek yok. Bazı aşırı Türkçecilerin böyle bir temayülüyle aslında bu ek yoktur. Biz ikinci kelimenin sonuna o ı'yı ya da i'yi eklemekle o anlamı veriyoruz gibi bir iddianın sonucu maalesef yani böyle bir görüş.
Bilelim, ya kullanırsak yine kullanalım. Ben diyorum ki yani hani ne diyor, şaz derler değil mi? Galat-ı meşhur. Galat-ı meşhur olarak kullanılsın. Ona kimsenin diyecek bir şey yok. Ben yani şöyle bir davam yok. Şu ismi değiştirelim, İslam İktisat yapalım gibi değil. Ama kullandığımız şeyin yanlış olduğunu Türkçe'de bilelim. Buna rağmen kullanırsak kullanalım tabii. Problem yok. Şimdi ben bir şey daha söyleyeyim. Şimdi aslında yani bugünkü konu mesela zekat. Shall I continue in English or in Turkish? Şimdi Türkçe devam edelim. Madem başladık öyle gidelim. Şimdi zekat aslında bir distribution olayı değil. Bir redistribution olayıdır. Onun için şimdi zekatı konuşuyorsak bizim konuştuğumuz şeyin distribution olmaması lazım. Redistribution olması lazım. Onun için eğer mesela distributive justice'ten bahsediyorsanız aslında bir bakıma fonksiyonel gelir dağılımından bahsediyorsunuz demektir ve orada biliyorsunuz orada da bir distribution olayı var. Yani fonksiyonel gelir bölüşümü hadisesinde bir gelir bölüşümü olayı var. Servet bölüşümü olayı var. Onu konuşuyor olursunuz. Eğer distribution hadisesinde elde ettiğiniz sonuç tatminkar ise mesele yok, ilişmezsiniz. Değilse redistribution yoluyla ona müdahale edersiniz. Şimdi İslamiyet'teki durum bundan çok farklı. İslamiyet'te mesela zekat Müslümanların ihtiyaca göre karar verebilecekleri bir olay değil. Zekat bir mecburiyettir. Ve buna İngilizce terimiyle inbuilt demek lazım. Yani şeyin kendisinde var. Ve sistemin muhataplarının ya da uygulayıcılarının dışında belirlenmiş bir şeydir. Zekat konusunda kimsenin diyecek bir şey yok. Zekat farzdır. Kimsenin bunu değiştirme yetkisi yoktur. Ve başka konularda da yoktur. Dolayısıyla bir kere bu çok önemli. Ve zekat biliyorsunuz İslami şeylerde mükellefin hükümleriyle ilgili skalada yeri farz-ı ayındır. Yani zekat şartlarına sahip herkes zekat vermek zorundadır. Şey yok. Bunun kaçamağı yok. Fakat İslamiyet'te bir de farz-ı kifaye var. Ve buna mesela farz-ı kifaye tekabül eden şeylere charity denemez. İngilizce'deki terimini kullanırsak charity diyemezsiniz. Çünkü farzdır o da nihayet. Charity dediğiniz şey nedir? Tasadduk. Bizim tasadduk dediğimiz şeydir. Yani verirsiniz, sevap kazanırsınız. Vermezseniz kimse sizden hesap sormaz. Herhangi bir günaha girmiş olmazsınız. Charity odur. Halbuki arada bir kategori daha var. O da farz-ı kifayedir. Farz-ı kifaye şudur. Diyelim ki insanlar çalıştı, çalışmalar neticesinde kazandı. Sonra zekat hadisesi devreye girdi. Buna rağmen eğer toplumda açlık tehlikesine maruz insanlar kalırsa toplumun bütününün görevi bu açlara sahip çıkmaktır. Ve bu farz-ı kifayedir. Yani kimsenin keyfine kalmış bir şey değil. İstesem veririm, istemesem vermem değil. Bir İslam toplumunda veyahut Müslümanların olduğu bir toplumda bir kişi açlıktan ölürse o toplumdaki herkes bundan sorumludur. Katil pozisyonundadır. Yani bakın bu charity değil. Bu zekat da değil. Yani kişi zekatı verir, bu lazım. Fakat eğer ondan sonra zekat meseleyi halletmemişse hala yapılabilecek şeyler var. Buna da farz-ı kifaye diyoruz. Gerçekten bunun Müslümanlarda netleşmesi lazım. Onların görevi zekatla bitmez. Ve Tasadduk da evet Müslümanın kendisine kalmış bir şey. İsterse verir, sevap kazanır. Vermezse herhangi bir şey olmaz, bir sorumluluğa yol açmaz. Ama farz-ı kifaye dediğimiz ara bir kategori var ki toplumsal sorumluluktur. İhtiyaç kalmazsa kimse mesul olmaz. Ve insanların bir kısmı görevi yerine getirirse diğerlerinden düşer. Ama hiç kimse yapmazsa, mesela bir İslam toplumunda bir kişinin ölmesi herkesi katil durumuna sokar. Yani o sorumlulukla karşı karşıya getirir. Bu bir yorum değil. Bu bir yorum değil. Bu gayet net bir İslami hükümdür. Peki, çok teşekkür ediyorum.